Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for your warm Egyptian hospitality so far. I'd like to talk about next generation broadband, national broadband networks. What are the global trends? What are some of the business and technical aspects about how to achieve it? And what I want to do is introduce some of the examples and practices by some of our consulting clients from around the world to try and give you some idea to stimulate the debate and give you an idea of options that are available to you. Okay, so everybody wants broadband. This is now no longer a matter of debate. Most governments therefore have a national broadband plan, and that plan is fine, and it usually includes a large-scale access network, including some other things. But bringing that network into fruition, actually building it, is quite a different matter. It takes a lot of effort, it takes technology and money. So let's look at some of the challenges to how to achieve a national broadband network. Okay. What are the common issues, key issues and solutions? We're talking national networks, therefore there is a strategic goal. We are doing this for strategic national reasons. This is not a simple commercial network. So for example, we are interested in expanding coverage, making it available to more people, such as rural developments and social inclusion. We want to stimulate the take-up of services. We want more people to use it. One of the things that broadband, certainly for many years, it's perceived as an expensive, almost premium product. We need to change that. If you're considering national terms, it must be an everyday product. So take-up of services. And that's actually one of the most common issues that my clients face, is how to stimulate take-up of broadband. Establishing various goals in terms of coverage and bandwidth is a good idea. It's good to push things forward. Government should be taking a leadership position to push the capabilities of the nation forward. And you may also be interested in your reform of your telecom sector. So you usually have a national incumbent, there's some other people as well, there's mobile operators, there's smaller players. Moving forward in the national network, what do all of those, how to move all of that market forward? You could try to keep the status quo. You could try to enhance the monopoly. You might want to maintain the duopoly. For example, in Singapore, had two major telcos. Or you might want to fully liberalize. All of these are discussions that come up when people talk about national broadband networks. But if you have a converged voice, data and video, and even mobile network, you may actually be having to wrestle with multiple markets and how to move multiple operators and companies forward. So it can be quite challenging. The key issue here is public money. If you have that allows me to move around. A key aspect is public money. If you're going to do a national network, then there's going to be some public money involved, and you have to then justify spending that public money. Okay. Now, I have been promoting fibre broadband now for over 10 years, and I have to say in the beginning it was very hard. 10 years ago, people didn't believe this was a good idea. Now it's a very different story. Now everybody wants broadband. They're asking for it. Now they're asking not should I use broadband, fibre broadband, but how to do it. Okay. So fibre is the default choice for providing broadband. And by fibre, what I mean is in terms of access, I'm talking GPON. So it's GPON is for access. If you have older copper networks that you want to upgrade, then it's fibre to the curb, fibre to the building. But if it's fibre to the home, then it will be a GPON. Okay, that's a default decision now by all of the major telcos. That is what they're interested in investing in. It's a mature technology, cost reduced, and it meets all of the demands that we see in the future. We don't immediately see a situation where fibre to the home is going to be exhausted in terms of capacity. So we have these overall goals. We've got public money. We need to establish what the goals of the project are. What are the various trends around the world that are useful to talk about? The first one that always comes up is money, how to fund the project. And like all big infrastructure investments, this is a long-term goal. Unfortunately, a lot of spending and political discussion tends to be more medium term. So this is an issue right there. Large infrastructure projects tend to be difficult to push through politically. Okay. How do we structure those funds? We can do a direct subsidy. We can run the network ourselves. We can do tax breaks. There are various ways to do it. There are various solutions that have worked. Okay. But what is the right choice? If you're going to make a large public investment on broadband, you need to understand that it's an enabling technology, that it supports many new services that may not even be understood well yet. It's an entrepreneurial machine, the internet, and this is where you really need to think about this in terms of business development for the nation. So don't talk in terms of services that you already know. Think about the services that are going to be built on in a few years' time. So you really have to be really quite visionary in leadership when you're considering the value of the investment. Investing in the internet, it's a strange effect. It can be subtle, it can be diffuse, but often it is pervasive and powerful. And those are very strange effects when you invest in money. If you build a bridge, you know exactly what you get. You invest in the internet, you are joining a global club of people who are using this network to have better lives, stronger nations, better economies and companies. And so it's not a leap of faith, but it is you have to structure the argument in quite high level leadership terms. The market structure. A lot of networks have gone open access, meaning that companies can access the national network, which seems a fair thing. That's quite a common thing to do. But how to achieve that? The most common pattern now is a two-layer model. So you have all of the access infrastructure, but then you have various companies that are allowed to use it, and that's starting to become the most common choice now. But you don't have to do that in one step. So, for example, Malaysia, which is right next to where I live in Singapore, they used Telecom Malaysia to build a national broadband network, and later they said, okay, now we will start allowing other people to use it. So it can be a two-step process. You don't have to solve every problem at the beginning. Where I live in Singapore, we famously have a three-layer network, which everybody wants to understand and talk about, but no one has ever copied it. And you have to understand what's going on in Singapore. It was really to split the project up so it could maintain the duopoly that existed before the network was built. So you had Singtel and StarHub. So that's a uniquely Singaporean solution. But it does tell us that there are individual solutions to be found for structuring the network. In the Malaysian case, coming back to that, there was a lot of controversy when the project was announced that all the money was going to be given to Telecom Malaysia. A lot of people said that's not fair. There are other companies, private companies, why should it go to the incumbent? And that's a fair point. But you have to realize also there's a practicality involved here. Who has the skills to build such a network? Who can do it quickly so that we can get the benefits quickly? I think choosing, for example, to use the incumbent was a very practical, pragmatic choice that worked well, because now Malaysia has over 1.3 million homes passed by fiber. There's over 500,000 users of the network already. It's clearly very successful and is now open access by some other providers as well. So that was the right choice to move the project forward quickly. In New Zealand, another one of my clients, what they did there was they tendered the project geographically. So they split the country up into individual geographic areas. People bid on those areas. Within each area, you have exclusivity. But so there is competition across the country, but there is a natural monopoly in each area, which saves money and is an efficient way to do it. So that's another way you can do it. To achieve that, their national telco, Telecom New Zealand, had to split itself up a little bit to break off some of the access. But that is another model you can follow.
In Malaysia, going back to them, it also gave Telekom Malaysia the opportunity to transform itself into a media and services company. So there was a national benefit both to Telekom Malaysia and to the nation, so that there was then more competition and vibrancy in media services as well. So in considering how to do that, you've got to look at the competition, the time to market, and also who has the skills to actually achieve such a network. The other thing that you might want to do with a national broadband network is to address key limitations that might exist. Philippines, for example, over 7,000 islands in the Philippines. The problem there is there's very few people who can afford to put the long distance lines in that connect all of these islands together. In fact, only 2 people can afford to do it. Everybody else has to buy services from these 2 major telcos. And so if you want to start a mobile or a fixed operation in Philippines, you are going to be using those 2 people. It is limited both at the backhaul and at the international gateway. Telcos in Philippines do not want to sell high-speed access, because if they did, all it would do was raise their costs of international transit. So you look at the limitations that you have in your country and see if you can structurally address those. It is very important when you build these networks that you use the assets that you have. So copper naturally lends itself to fibre to the curb or fibre to the building. That's fine, and it's a very good and quick upgrade for copper networks. But also, from a government point of view, can you arrange access to underground ducts, poles, rights of way? All of these are critically important when you're trying to build a network, and it can stop rollout if you are not done correctly. So in the Singapore case, the government put in a lot of money, about 1 billion Singapore dollars. Most of that money actually went into buying out access to Singtel's ducts, cableways and so on. That's actually where most of the money went, because they knew that the network would not be successful if they could not reuse the assets they already had. Technology choices. We are living in a world, the internet now is fibre. It is a fibre network. All of the core of the internet is fibre. What we are seeing is that it is now becoming fibre at the edge as well. And the way I see things going is if you have internet access, it will be fibre with one wireless link. So if I'm using a mobile phone, it will be a wireless link to my base station, then it'll be fibre. If I'm at home, I'll have fibre to the home and I'll be using Wi-Fi or something like that. It's fibre plus one wireless link. And one of the reasons that's becoming true is latency. We talk about bandwidth and speed, but a lot of the up-and-coming services require very fast latency, very low latency. So that is becoming a dominant factor for people who are looking ahead at our next generation services. In general, though, all NBNs adopt multiple technologies. This is a fact of life. It's a practical way to do it. So it will be fibre as close to the home as possible, and then it will reuse whatever it can, whether it is a LTE link or wireless, copper link, or so on. Most of then I think most of the effort then in trying to understand which technology to use then are based on CapEx and return on investment. So one of the things we were doing with clients is a model that allows them to choose the technology based on those factors. So a commercial approach, it can be modified by government aims for having a lot of fibre. Australia famously wanted as much fibre as possible. It's quite expensive, but it's a noble goal. Other countries take a more pragmatic approach. The other thing that the government needs to do is create the ecosystem of services. As the government has many, many services, particularly central government, taxation, health and education. You don't realise how many touch points the government has with people. And in translating those into electronically delivered services is extremely important. The government is going to be the primary driver of the transition to electronic services. Primary driver, and it needs to be embedded into all of the actions of the government. In practice then, we keep talking about fibre networks. The infrastructure part of a national broadband plan is actually a smaller part. It may be perhaps the most expensive single piece, but it's only a part of the overall plan. The Malaysian plan has been running since 2003. Singapore has a 10-year plan that's running from 2005. The fibre networks were only a small part of those master plans. One of the things that you can do to move the problem along is you can consolidate existing networks. You don't want lots of overlapping networks. Australia is famous for this example. Australia is using government money to buy up older cable networks and so on and shut them down and convert them to fibre. An extremely bold and step, so that it didn't, so it allowed the fact that everybody can rely on the fact that fibre will be the dominant choice. Fibre will be available to you. And conversely, we also need to decommission old networks. This is starting to become a topic of conversation. There's a lot of benefits to shutting down some of these older networks. They're expensive, they use a lot of power, they use a lot of buildings. If you can recover all of those assets, you make your operational costs lower, you make prices lower. One of my clients in Indonesia, it claims they actually make money when they transition to fibre to the curb and they sell off all of the old copper wires. They use a third-party company to do it. They actually make money from recovering all of the scrap value of the metal. And their electricity costs go down to a degree. So what can go wrong? We've got our plans now. We know what the kind of things we want to do with our national broadband network. What kind of challenges can we face? The first one is most people price it too expensive. It is too expensive. They price it as a premium product and then wonder why people aren't subscribing to it. The prices are just too high. You need to find a way to find products that at least start below the affordable level for everybody. Okay. And I help clients with that. Some of it is marketing, some of it is getting the costs out of the business, and some of it is relying on the fact that once you have good broadband, you're going to really make your money on building up more services. You're building up your revenues. Don't try to make your money on the subscription. Okay. Very common that FBB is used is seen as a competitor to mobile. This is a very common way of looking at the marketplace. I kind of disagree. I think the two are complementary. Certainly sometimes some markets become very dominated by mobile, but fibre has some very strong attributes. It's a family thing. If you connect up your house or your home, everybody's using it. It's high speed, it's always on, it's not shared, it is shared. So these are, if you look at what people do with smartphones, most of the traffic downloaded on smartphones is done over Wi-Fi. It is not done over the cellular network. Most people wait to do their large downloads when they get access to Wi-Fi, and usually at home. One of the problems that we find is common amongst our clients is they try to reuse their copper network. They do, say, fibre to the curb. Sounds really good. And they then assume that their job is done. The fibre is now only 200 or 300, 400 yards from the house. Not true. One of the clients that we did a deep network analysis for, we found that only 66% of the copper lines that they had upgraded with fibre to the curb could actually support high definition video. They had assumed it was 100. It was only 66 because that last little bit of copper still counts. So you need a system to address that. Do you really know how well your facilities are able to support next generation services? And in the limit, you may actually have to do fibre to the home or replace the copper to actually achieve your aims. What we're finding now, we're in a world where, for example, in Singapore, I can get 1 gigabit broadband from 3 different providers. Okay, that's Singapore, it's not common, but 1 gigabit. If you're in Japan, in the major cities in Japan, you can now get 2 gigabit home broadband. Frankly, it's too much. Most people cannot use that. But we are getting to a situation where supply is a little bit greater than demand. And I think we just need to realize that will find its own level. As services will fill up that bandwidth opportunity. And that's where we need to hold to our vision of high-speed services in the future. Okay, so it's going to take a while to do that. So I'm getting to the point where I'd like to summarize them. I believe that government has a very strong role to play in successful national broadband networks. The money is important, the leadership, the creating the services and pushing people to consider broadband as part of their lives are all things that government should be doing. They should be aiming to make it an everyday product. It should not be just availability and speed, but you have to make it affordable. So, for example, in Indonesia, the Indonesian government also has a national broadband plan. They have set very aggressive targets. They want to get millions of homes passed with broadband services in the next 4 years, so about 15 million. And given that currently there's only about 2 million fixed broadband users, so another 13 million homes passed in the next 4 years. They're very aggressive about it, and they're really pushing the telcos to achieve this. And what they're interested in is you've got to get started, you've got to get people to adopt it. So one of the things that Telkom Indonesia are doing is they're actually giving away broadband. Sounds radical. Effectively, what they're doing is if you're on an upgraded line, they will give you the modem and they will say, look, try it, have a go, see if you like it. You have to pay as a small fee to use it. It's like a prepay home broadband. But that's an extremely forward-thinking idea. That you can't wait for people to decide they need it. A lot of people don't define what they do in terms of broadband. They define it in terms of things that are interesting to them, talking to their friends, looking up information, using entertainment services. This is the way they define their lives. So the idea that actually seeding the broadband into people's homes is, I think, a very good idea. Technology-wise, there's going to be a mixture. We are definitely in a fixed and wireless world, and the two will ideally mix between services will move seamlessly between them. And I think that's the way we need to think about it. It's not either or. There often are structural changes to the market when you introduce broadband. There is no single pattern for that. You have to find one that works for you. But I would stress that I think that, especially now that where we are in the maturity of broadband around the world, find something that moves forward quickly. Find a plan that gives a lot of people broadband really quickly. I think that's a little bit more important than getting all of the structures right. If I look at, say, Malaysia and Singapore, they started with announcing their plans at roughly the same time. If I look at how long it took them to achieve about 1 million homes passed, Singapore took 2 years more. Singapore took 2 years more to achieve about the same amount of rollout. And why? Because with the 3-layer model, with creating 2 new companies, with all of these regulations and lawyers, it just took a long time to get it set up. Malaysia put the money into the incumbent. They leveraged the skills they already had and said, let's get going. And so they achieved it 2 years faster. Right? So that's, these are important lessons. Practical lessons sometimes are the most useful. I'd like to bring it to a close there. I think I've given you an idea what the opportunities are, and I'd like to encourage you, hopefully, that inshallah we can make a national broadband network a reality in Egypt. So thank you very much for your attention and time.